Participate this evening, and I would yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to take some time now to rise to talk about something that I've talked to, some would say, too much on this floor, to yet again discuss the grave threat and massive opportunity that is the climate crisis. Even as we talk right now about the necessity of limiting global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius, let's follow the math. The planet has already warmed by 1 degree. We only have a 0.5 degree to go. The last 7 years were the hottest ever on record. Even in spite of the pandemic, global levels of carbon dioxide have hit record levels. In fact, the last time CO2 levels were as high as they are right now was 4 million years ago. Sea levels were 50 feet higher. That is the reality of what happens when heat melts ice. Ice becomes water. This is the reality we have made. If we are to be judged by our works, and we do nothing more in this moment, that judgment will not be pretty. That is our challenge, and it is our opportunity. But this change in CO2 levels, this didn't happen over 1 million years. It didn't happen over 1,000 years. It didn't even happen over 100 years. Half of all the CO2 we have ever emitted as a species, since that first fire that some upright hominid built in a cave 1 million years ago, half of all the CO2 we have ever emitted was since 1990. That is within my lifetime. It is within the lifetime of almost all of the members of this body. That's nearly a century after Svante Arrhenius discovered the greenhouse effect, since the science was basically settled. 100 years after the photovoltaic effect was invented that powers solar panels today, and more than a decade after the fossil fuel companies knew about climate change and decided to promote misinformation instead of acting. 1989, when the UN formed the IPCC, when Ronald Reagan's EPA said we need to create a global cap and trade program to reduce a global pollutant, to protect the ozone hole, chlorofluorocarbons. When that same EPA and the subsequent George Bush, both Republican presidents, I would add, when they said, let's take that same model and apply it to a domestic pollutant, acid rain-forming compounds. We have sugar maples in New England to now because of their leadership. We have a shrinking ozone hole because of their leadership. When they did that at the end of the 1980s, we were on the right track. That was 30 years ago. What do we have to do now to turn this ship around? The heck of it is we know what we have to do to reduce our emissions, and we know how to do it. Building out clean energy infrastructure, creating and building wind turbines, solar panels, building big things is what America is good at. We do not need to be constrained by our ambition. My goodness. When the New Deal was passed, we electrified 80% of rural America in just 15 years. I'd like to think our capabilities are even greater now. Let's embrace that opportunity. The hard questions in this line of work are the zero-sum ones. How do you allocate wins to some parties when they imply a loss to another? That's not climate. The hard questions in clean energy policy are not how we allocate the pains of this transition. They are how we allocate the gains of this transition. Clean energy is cheap energy. If you don't believe me, ask anyone with a solar panel on their roof how much they paid for electricity yesterday. Ask anybody with a coal plant, they know that number. The clean energy transition means it's a win for the folks who get to go to work building more efficient buildings and wind turbines and solar panels. It's a win for every American. I've pulled this. 100% of Americans like to pay less for energy. They will all win. 100% of Americans like cleaner air. They will all win. 100% of Americans do not want to live on a coast that's flooding, or forests that are on fire, or derechos that are coming across the Midwest. Our obligation is to seize this chance and to make sure, this is a hard problem, but it's a good problem, to make sure that those gains are equitably distributed through our society. The President's infrastructure proposal is just that. It isn't just a chance for clean energy, it's a make or break opportunity to finally do what's scientifically necessary before it's too late. Proposals like a clean energy standard, a build-out of electric transmission lines, requirements for federal purchases of clean energy will help send our emissions from the electric sector to zero, will be the bedrock of a new clean economy. Cutting some, or let's be ambitious, all of the $650 billion a year that the IMF has said we currently subsidize the fossil fuel industry will finally give us efficient markets in our energy sector. $650 billion, that's about how much we spend on Medicaid, subsidizing an energy that apparently can't compete under a free market. This will help make lives better for hundreds of millions of Americans, both now and in the decades to come. Now, 12 years ago, when Waxman-Markey was the debate du jour, we let an opportunity to act on the climate crisis pass us by. Since that time, we've kept emitting and temperatures have kept rising. I told you I've given this speech a few too many times. I don't want to be giving this speech a year from now. I don't particularly want to be giving it tomorrow. I certainly don't want to be giving it 12 years from now. We have a chance now to act while our planet can still afford it, and we can embrace that because our wallets are going to love it. Before I took this job, when I was running a clean energy company, I had a board member who gave me a piece of advice that's always stuck with me. He said, in the end, the only thing that really matters in this life is whether your grandchildren can say they were proud of you. Let's be clear. Our grandchildren are not going to be proud of us. They're not going to pat us on the back for doing only what was politically possible. They don't care. What matters is, did we do what was scientifically necessary? And I got a lot of colleagues on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of this building, who will say, you're naive, Casten. What's necessary is so far in excess of what's politically possible, we just can't do that. If that is your approach to this moment, the only thing I know for certain is you are not cut out for leadership. Our moment, our challenge in this moment, is to make what is necessary possible. It's all that matters. Because while the best chance for climate action was 30 years ago, our last chance is now. I'd like to now yield to my friend, Mr. Schneider from Illinois.